Catherine Austin Fitts, founder and managing member of Solari Investment Advisory Services, LLC, president of the Hamilton Securities Group Investment Bank and financial software developer, assistant secretary of housing, federal housing commissioner under Bush 1, managing director and member of the board of the Wall Street firm Dillon Read & Co., Inc. Doesn't get any more elite than that. Catherine has designed and closed over $25 billion in transactions and investments to date and has led portfolio strategy for $300 billion of financial assets and liabilities. Solari.com is the website, Solari.com. We're very honored to have her. And I want to get into what we're facing as a society, what the elites are doing. And it's great to have Catherine Austin Fitts on with us today. Catherine?
Alex, it's always a pleasure. As you know, I'm a huge fan of you and InfoWars.
Lord, break down what you think's most important, but first tell us about yourself.
Well, I came out of the Bush administration thinking, oh, my word, the fascists are going to kill us all. We need to do something. And I started an investment bank in Washington, and our goal was to help communities finance with equity, because rather than shipping all of our money to Wall Street and then hoping a little bit trickles back, or shipping it all to Washington and hoping a little trickles back, my theory was, how about if we financed our own businesses and did much more locally? So I started an investment bank. One of the things we did was we were hired on competitive bid to be financial advisor to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, where I'd worked as an assistant secretary. And we did loan sales, Alex, and they were unbelievably successful. It was during the Clinton administration, and but the corruption got worse and worse. Now, it was terrible in the Bush administration. It just kept getting worse in the Clinton administration, and we were. A decision was made. I was part of a group of people who were saying, "Oh my goodness, with GATT and NAFTA, we're gonna ship all the jobs abroad." And we need to do something, or else the American people are going to be left high and dry. We're going to lose. The middle class will be wiped out. How are we going to develop new skills? How are we going to help people create new jobs and support small business? So we're a part of a group that working on all of that. And literally, a decision was made, rather than address the real problems and help the American people jump the curve on the situation, that instead we would bubble the economy and pull massive amounts of capital and reinvest them abroad. And
so this was a conscious decision, and you were there on the inside witnessing
absolutely. This. And I'll tell you, one of the best videos I've ever seen, you can get it up on my blog at Solari.com, /blog, is Sir James Goldsmith did a speaking tour trying to stop the GATT from being passed in the World Trade Organization to be adopted, and basically said, this is the most frightening, terrifying thing. We're going to have 3 billion people moved off the land. We're, massive unemployment worldwide. We're going to have massive structural unemployment in the United States. He gave this interview, it's up on YouTube, to Charlie Rose in 1995, and he predicts everything that's happening now. Now, remember, this man's a billionaire, very successful businessman, and basically said, look, this is the establishment against everybody else. And he said, this is going to be the most devastating, horrible thing that has ever happened to the world. It's absolutely crazy. And he lays it all out, and so I can say the same thing. We were on the inside. We're working with the administration, and we knew that we were going to create massive unemployment. Now, here's the big secret of the work that I did when I was in Washington during that period. We created something, Alex, called Community Wizard, which was a software tool that would allow us to look at the sources and uses of government money by place, because America's just 3,100 counties. And when you look at government investment by place, what you discover is that a great deal of money is being spent to centralize economic and political power and to basically subsidize large corporations and all sorts of unproductive behavior, whether it's, people on welfare all the way up to corporations on welfare. Well, planet Earth divides up into what I call the pro-centralization team and the pro-decentralization team. And if you look at how the money works, Alex, the economy has been steadily centralizing more and more money, and so more and more people are on the dole. They're on the payroll of the pro-centralization team. And the rest of us are on the pro-decentralization team. And part of the challenge is we have not yet created a vision of where the alternative is.
Breaking down the centralization team versus the decentralization team, or team tyranny versus team liberty, and then get into whatever subjects you want to cover, solutions, how you think people can individually protect themselves, strategies for states and counties.
Of the what I call the black budget, because you really need to understand the history of this. People don't understand how could it have gotten so bad and me not notice. What happened, Alex, was in 1947 and 1949, we passed the National Security Act and the CIA Act. And those two acts in combination allowed money to be clawed out of the federal government and federal budget and spent in non-transparent ways. So we created a secret way of funding very big projects through the governmental mechanism. Now remember, they can borrow as much money as they want. And then something else happened, because if you go back and you look at the history of financial fraud and the kind of corruption we're looking at, and you interview or you research and you read the people sort of dealing with it, it all comes back to a point after World War II where literally the government lost control of the technology. We had the most powerful, secretive black technology in the world, including some that we brought over from the Nazis. And literally, we've created this funding mechanism that paid corporations to control and manage technology. And a lot of what we're dealing with goes back to the fact that we've had since then 50 to 60 years of incredible non-transparent governmental flows going into basically corporate-controlled technology that many of us don't understand. And when you say, well, how can the military force countries all around the world to take paper that keeps going down in value, it all comes back, as you probably know, to a lot of the invisible weaponry, the satellite systems, and all this incredible technology that we don't understand and know about. Does that make any sense?
I mean, they brag that they're really 30 years advanced, and they've got satellites where they can radiate somebody from space. I mean, we have a highly advanced technocracy that has walled itself off in military reservations, private corporate reservations, as you know, is heading up a big company that developed a lot of financial software systems. And they've rolled out the internet systems, the banking systems, the cashless systems that have now just been adopted. It's like poisoning the well, poisoning the water hole, and the deer come to it and drink and then go off and die and don't even know what killed them.
Right.
It's just like all the technology to track and control us is built into the iPhone or the cell phone. We just accept it, and we're now basically like savages in this 21st century Buck Rogers system, not even knowing what we're part of. And the elite, as Bill Joy wrote in the April issue in 2000 in Wired magazine, the elite don't need us anymore. Why the future doesn't need us?
Well, it's worse than that. Not only do they not need us, but we've become very expensive. I mean, let's just look at the numbers in the United States. In the United States, if you look at the national debt before the bank bailouts, each American had about $38,000 of national debt. If you count up the Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid and other contingent liabilities, and you say, what's the present value of those contingent liabilities, it's about $138,000, so more than, say, 4 times the current national debt. And so we've literally, in one sense, the baby boomers have reached a point where we're worth more dead than alive. Just looking at the numbers.
So if they succeed with this technological extermination grid that the White House science czar talks about, if all the population manipulation and reduction we've seen was just testing, what is the end game? I mean, if they are able to carry this out, how do you see it unfolding?
Well, frankly, I don't think they're going to be able to carry it out. I mean, I'm not saying they're not going to try, but it's a very big planet. What all of us need to understand is, in a world where let's just take as an assumption that we can be irradiated by a satellite, by invisible weaponry from space, how do you push back against something that is that ubiquitous, both in terms of ability to force or ability to manipulate, whether it's through the media, your iPhone, or whatever? How do you do it? And if you look back through history, what you will see is where, John Adams said the revolution was not the war, the revolution was in the hearts and the minds of the people. And Alex, we're talking about a point of view and a way of being which is unbelievably black. And if there's one thing I know about people, people are fundamentally healthy and people are fundamentally grounded, and they just do not go along with this kind of blackness. Now, it can do incredible harm on the way, but you're talking about ultimately a government that doesn't have what I call the Chinese call the mandate of heaven. You know, it's something that's based on a culture which is too perverted, too unhealthy, and too lacking in the kind of open transparency and it sits in its own bell jar.
So you're saying there's going to be a revolution even within the control system and the elite not having the stomach to carry all this out. The problem is, and correct me if I'm wrong, if that's not what you mean by that, or this revolution in the mind, and I agree with you, that's happening, as members of the mid-level establishment really figure out, my God, this really is a giant extermination system, then we see them racing to go to full robotic aircraft, full robotic tanks, full remote control systems where you have robotic factories that manufacture and that engage in the upkeep of the systems, and then it's all deployed. Basically, a Terminator Skynet system is what they're building, but it's controlled by humans.
Right, but you cannot run a large operation or enterprise, let alone a world government, on force. It has to have some kind of moral authority. It has to have some kind of vision and values that inspire its members to be loyal. Force is not enough, because remember that the elites are fighting. What you've got is you've got a situation where because the elite is a pretty big group, but many of these people are prisoners of a system. In other words, they're part of what I call the central banking warfare model. And that model, Alex, the important thing to understand about that model is to date it's worked.
That's it. They feel like they're part of the power structure, even though it's going to destroy them.
Well, but here's the thing. We have 57% of households in America now, headed for 67%, are dependent on government money. In other words, you know, I call it the tapeworm economy. It's like having a tapeworm. The tapeworm injects into you a chemical that makes you, you know, do what's good, eat what's good for the tapeworm, and so the tapeworm grows stronger and you grow weaker. Right now, the majority of us are practicing a philosophy of follow the tapeworm. All that needs to happen, Alex, if you could get a critical mass, say, you know, the 100 monkey syndrome, if you could get 6 to 10% of the people saying, you know, I'm not going to go along with this, I'm going to withdraw, because you don't want to have a fight with them. You just want to say, you know something, I'm pulling my money out of your game because your game is shrinking. The problem with the centralization economically is it's shrinking the wealth. It's making a few people a little wealthier. You're literally killing off the real economy, so you can centralize it, because when you flood a country with this much government money and government debt to keep things going, that's what you're doing. You're basically shrinking the pie of wealth in a way that centralizes. But people are going along, and the minute we decide, you know something, this is really unhealthy, this can't go in any place that's good for us, our children, our grandchildren, and we start to shift in this does not have to be picking a fight, it's just withdrawing. So if we turn off our TVs, so we withdraw our time, if we withdraw our money from the big financial institutions and the big banks and start what I call demonetizing, if you come into any county in America, Alex, you will find, you know, literally one person has got their savings in bank CDs that are in a large New York bank. Another one has their IRA in stock of that same large New York bank, and their best friend is borrowing money from that New York bank on their credit card for 23%. So the first two women are making 3 to 4% if they're lucky, and their friend is borrowing that money back for 23%. Well, why do they need a big New York bank to be in the middle of them?
Exactly. They should be loaning to each other and keeping it all local.
Right. Because there is here's where the opportunity is. When you start to dig in and you bring transparency to how the money works in a place, and you say, look, let's withdraw from the tapeworm system in a way that makes us money, because the problem we have is our wealth is shrinking. So we need to find a way to withdraw from the system that expands our wealth and stops us from getting drained financially. So, for example, I can't tell you how many communities and counties where you will find government contracts paying a corporation up to $100 and $150 an hour to do something that someone in that community would love to do for $25 an hour plus health care.
And they should go in and take control of their counties and make the county spend the money with the locals. But they don't, because one big fat cat wants to keep it all for themselves.
Now, let me give you an example. In Florida and Tennessee, I'm sure it's more states too, the foods I live in Tennessee, 20% of our population is now on food stamps. 20%, Alex. Now, there was a woman in Florida who worked all her life and then lost a job when the economy went down. She got food stamps. She had a problem with the food stamps, called the food stamp hotline, the customer service line, to discover that the woman she was talking to, who was helping, doing customer service for her food stamps, worked for J.P. Morgan Chase in India. Okay, so the government is paying her not to work. At the same time, the government is paying somebody in India to do a job she could do. This doesn't make any sense because the government is paying twice. Well, what's interesting is if we reached a point where a significant, and I mean the 6 to 10%, like the 100 monkey syndrome, if we could get a critical mass of people to see how the game is played and how it works around the money, that's when things start to change.